Well, you came today to hear about the importance of fathers. Let me just tell you briefly, I am a father. I have 4 children. My son is 12 years old, and I have 3 daughters, ages 9, 7, and 4. And last month, I spoke at the coalition, the Summit to End Sexual Exploitation in Orlando, and I spoke about father-daughter relationships and how the father has a unique contribution to the daughter that the mother doesn't provide. The research bears this out very clearly. And my presentation is not working, so here is what I'm going to do. And I think this might even be better. I could just rattle it off, but I don't know if that would be that interesting, especially because I have pictures of my daughters, and that's really cute. You guys have been learning a lot of stuff, and this is what I do this in my classes a lot. Sometimes we have to push the pause button and say, what's really going on here? What am I learning? What am I gaining? And some of it's in many ways it may be like drinking through a fire hose of information. We have a lot of great information, a lot of great leaders, people who've done amazing things. And I hope you don't mind if you can indulge me on this. I would like to do a Q&A to hear about what questions you still have about the things that you've learned at this point. And I'm not going to say that this is because I'm the end-all, be-all, but I've got my hands in a lot of different cookie jars, or maybe I'm spinning a lot of different plates, whatever metaphor you want to use. And so maybe I could connect you up with the right answer or the person who knows the right answer, or I can get you the resource to that answer. But a lot of you have this big desire to do something, and maybe you just don't know what to do. What's my niche? My students will ask that all the time, because I go to the United Nations every year with United Families International. Kelly, she's much more seasoned there. I'm just the new guy going, hey guys, can I play too? So it's been a fabulous experience. I bring 6 students with me every year and get to speak at all these different conferences. But you know what? Everybody can do something. And so I don't want you to think, sometimes my students will say, well, does that mean I have to go to the UN? Does that mean I have to do this to make a change? Obviously, no. So sometimes it's just you have this burning flame and you just don't know what to do with it, where to throw the flame. So I'm wondering if you have a question that you'd like to ask. It could be about father-daughter relationships. It could be about anything in the social sciences. It could be how do I find anything. I know there's questions on your mind. You've probably written them down. And most of you are religious. The Holy Spirit has probably been working on you quite a bit, like it has been with me. So let's open it up to questions. What questions do you have? And Kelly will be...
I'll be the runner.
Well, I like what you said about the burning fire within you. This is really just, my fire it's more than hot right now with everything that I've learned. I kind of already know my niche, and that has to do with the effects of divorce on family, particularly children, and also having to do with fathers. So I'm really quite disappointed I don't get to see that. I was just wondering if there's a way I could still get my hands on that.
Yeah.
And if you don't recognize me, I'm an online student, BYU, Idaho.
Okay.
Holla. Okay.
Okay.
And so I've actually, without realizing it, I kind of already, passionate about that. Every time I had a chance, I got my hands on whatever it was I was doing in English, math, whatever subject, and I had a chance to do a project or a research paper or something like that. It was all about that. I did a large research paper called The Effects of I can't even remember the title now all of a sudden. The effects of divorce on children,
Yeah.
And particularly with fathers not being around. Mm-hmm. And so my question to you is, do you, what do you know, or how? I want to do something about that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
That's the one thing I'm not sure. So when you mentioned that, I thought, okay,
Yeah.
I have been able to get my feelers out about everything else that I'm passionate about, but this one thing. So
Yeah. Well, let me speak on that for a second. The research is pretty clear that the more fathers are involved, and I'm going to, in both sons and daughters' lives, the better they are in a lot of ways. So the unique contribution that fathers make to their girls is self-esteem. For some, and there's a lot of reasons behind this. I won't flesh out all the reasons. But the father has a greater impact on the daughter's self-esteem than the mother. And it's not that the mother doesn't. the self-esteem, the sexuality, the relationships with men. The dad lays the foundation for relationships with men. And there's a whole slew of other things. Body image. Dad has an enormous role, even a bigger contribution, which may sound counterintuitive. You may think, well, mom teaches best because maybe she struggles with some her body image issues. And she does have a profound effect, but dad's even more so. So there's this great collaboration of researchers and family life educators out of Stanford, and I think it's Stanford. It's in, I can't remember the exact school. Maybe it's USC. It's out of California. Universities in California, they're doing a program called Supporting Father Involvement. And they've studied to see how effective is it if we bring fathers who are not involved with their children's life, whether they're divorced, single dads, or regardless of the marital status. If we bring dads to this workshop that's 6 to 12 weeks long, are they going to be more involved? And the research had found that, yes, they were more involved. The relationship with the biological mother improved, and the relationship with the child improved, and the child's well-being improved. And this was true for even divorced dads. And so another thing the research makes clear is the more involved dads are, even if they're divorced. So if dads are maybe they're once a week or once a month when it comes to custody, they don't get to have a whole lot of involvement in their child's life. But even if they have a strong emotional connection and try to stay connected to we'll just stick with daughter for a minute. Stay with the daughter's life and be involved and say, hey, I'm here for you. If he does that, she actually improves. The effects of divorce are not taken away, but they're lessened, the negative effects of divorce. Another thing to that, if the dad will heal the relationship with mom, if they're still fighting, then that still makes the effects of divorce worse. It's like throwing gas on the fire. So there's a lot of programs out there like supporting a father involvement that will increase the well-being of a child who's a victim of divorce. But again, one of the number one predictors for how well children will fare after divorce is how is the two parents' relationship. It doesn't mean you can get rid of all the negative effects from it, but you can lessen it if mom and dad will have some peace and they're not constantly mudslinging and pitting the child against each parent. Does that make sense? So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so with what we're working with, a lot of the times the cultural norm in many of the cultures in the United States is that men are less feeling, and so they have a kind of a pressure to not communicate with their daughters, especially, and children as much. And because there are, of course, men who do, and do very well, but there are also a lot of men who do not.
Yeah.
So how can we encourage dialogue between parent or like father-daughter, or how do you get, especially to have good listening skills, or actually to listen? Because you can talk all day long, and there's like the whole zone out, I'm paying attention to football idea.
Yeah.
But how can we encourage that?
Well, I think the right kind of education. So when you guys are trying to change the world, you got to make sure you're armed with good, and I promise I'm creeping up to your question, okay? So this is the big foundation leading up to it. You got to learn you need to be armed with good data, good research. You have to understand what you're talking about. I'm a religious person. I'm a Christian. I'm a Latter-day Saint. And it drives me. That's really my fire. And I try to tell my students that really should drive you. But there's some places that me trying to preach the gospel is going to either make them more upset, or they're going to tune out and they're not going to listen. And especially if I'm trying to persuade policy. So I'm not saying hide your faith, but your faith, truth is truth, regardless if it comes from Scripture or if it comes from a research study. To me, it all emanates from God, and we just uncover it through science, things that maybe we already knew. But now we can use it to be more persuasive. So I say that because we need to be able to be armed, being articulate, credible advocates for the family and for faith, instead of just saying, you're all going to hell because you don't believe what I'm believing. And sometimes I see that in our movement. That's not very helpful. Now, when it comes to how do you help dads, because I give that foundation, because how do we help make change here? How do we make change? We got to be persuasive. We got to be credible. We've got to be articulate. But you got to help the dad see that there's a problem with what he's doing. And that's really hard. This supporting father involvement program I referred to, a lot of dads don't like to hear they're not doing it right. I think out of moms and dads struggle more with the prideful, I'm doing this right and don't try to tell me what I'm doing. On average. I realize there's plenty of exceptions to that. So there's a lot of research that shows very clearly how if dad is emotionally involved, then his daughter will thrive more. Most dads soften up once a daughter shows up. Like, I know when every single one of my daughters, you're also asking kind of the wrong guy, because I'm a blubbering. Every time I talk about my daughters, I just get really weepy. I've got 3 daughters, 4 sisters, 90% female students, a mother, a wife. So I'm just surrounded by females. So I'm probably more feminine than masculine. But in fact, I introduced my wife to Anne of Green Gables, to Sense and Sensibility, to musicals. My wife is amazing, and my wife fixes a lot of the stuff in the house. So she lets me keep my man card. That's a side note. So you had to help the dad see the great benefits of it. It's been said that a man doesn't desire food until he's hungry, but a man won't desire this kind of emotional bond with his daughter until he sees what's lacking. And so whether that's through an educational program, social media can be very persuasive to get them to get their attention and see what's going on here. If you think of John Mayer's song, fathers, be good to your daughters. Daughters will love like you do. Girls become lovers who turn into mothers. So mothers, be good to your daughters too. You know that song, right? Okay, actually, I got to sing more like him. So mother, he has more of a rasp. But that song actually is exactly what the research shows. And even though John Mayer is not a scholar, he has made it very clear in his song. I think we use things like that to hook people. They may not want to hear the data, but find a story, something that's very, very persuasive, a human interest component, a hook, whether it's a song, a meme, draws them in, but then you hit them with the research to say, I'm not just spouting off my opinion here. There's a lot of stuff to support that. And then when he starts to see the fruits of the father-daughter relationship, encouraging him to go on daddy-daughter dates, which is one of my favorite things with my daughters, to sit down and stop preaching and start listening, as you said. All these things can be learned. And sometimes the dad's the better listener out of the mom and dad, but more often than not, the dad has to learn. John Gottman calls it emotion coaching. I think he has a great program out there. If you want a great book that talks about the importance of emotional intelligence, Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child by John Gottman. It's a phenomenal book. In fact, a lot of our students study that one. So that was a long answer, but I hope that helped you. Yes?
Okay, so I have a question about domestic violence. So is it, do the chances increase for a son to be more likely to be an abuser if the father is absent, and is the daughter, if they have a daughter that is with an absent father, is she more likely to be in an abusive relationship?
Yes and no. So that's a good question. So if the father is not, we have to also remember there's a difference between being physically present and emotionally present. So if the dad is not physically or emotionally present, for the son, one of the ways he learns to channel his natural masculine aggression. Now, this is so politically incorrect, and I love it because the research still bears it out. And I don't care political correctness. I care about, we've got plenty of data. We've got to stop hiding behind PC stuff. So his natural masculine aggression, the dad is the one who really helps him learn how to channel that, to use it for good. On average, boys are much more active. In fact, a great book on this is called Why Gender Matters from Leonard Sachs. He's a psychologist and a medical doctor, and it has no political, when he wrote it, it had no political overtones or anything like that. He just was saying, here's the research. So let me give you a little bit of preface on that. They found that in brand new infants laying in the crib, when they had, so they'd have a mobile that would be making movement or spinning, and they had a nurse making the mobile spin. All the female babies looked at the nurse, and all the male babies looked at the moving parts. No wonder we like to watch football, right? But that was with no socialization. That had nothing to do with environment. Those were all the babies looked that way. The women were more wired for this relational stuff, and the men were more wired for the action stuff. And the dads help the young men channel their natural gifts that men are supposed to have, whether they're stereotypically masculine or feminine. We're not going to tease that apart. But that's what the dads do. So you see boys who, without their dad present, becoming much more violent on average, more likely to join a gang or to try to find some sort of identity somewhere else, having a harder time regulating that. The women are more likely to sexually exploit themselves on average. And so when I spoke last month in Orlando on this, my premise was that with 24 million, and this is the United States, I don't know what the stats are in the world, but 24 million children are growing up without their biological father in the United States. If even half of those were girls, we are feeding the porn industry or making it easier. Because I was speaking with women who, they call themselves survivors or overcomers of the porn industry. They used to be strippers in porn films and movies. And they talked about how much they really yearned for male attention because they never got it from dad. And that's what the research really shows over and over again. I'm trying to fill in this natural void that I believe is God-given, but also that if you don't even want to bring in God, it's natural into natural law. It's given to us that way, and when that void is there, they try to fill it in with other ways. It doesn't mean if you grew up with your dad, you're automatically going to be a stripper, but we see that tendency to, I'm trying to fill in that void somehow. Maybe I want love so much, I will be willing to give sex or do things like that. Let me just share you one more thing on that. One of those girls said, this woman who was a former stripper and who had changed her life, and it was very moving speech. She said when she would dance for men, she thinks it's because she wanted to dance for her dad in her pretty dress when she was 3. She never got that. And so she was trying to find a way to fill in that hole somehow. And it was very powerful for me. And it's not just an emotional story, although that's true, because the data bears that out too. So, good question. Where? Yes.
Hey. I keep on seeing that the research shows that live-in boyfriends are that the children are very much higher risk of being abused by the live-in boyfriend of the mother rather than their father. So my question is, why is that the case? What is the difference between the relationship between the biological father and the live-in boyfriend?
Oh, well, I think a lot of it has to do with just investment, right? This is not my child. And if it's a couple's cohabiting, you're right. One of the most violent places for a child to live is with biological mother, live-in boyfriend. And so there's no investment, there's no emotional, personal investment on the boyfriend's part. The boyfriend may be there for a variety of selfish reasons, and a child could get in the way of that. So I think if you just look at the motives of why he's there, he's not there for the child, he's there for his girlfriend. And this is kind of like an impediment to my happiness. And plus, he's not my child. So I think that's the short version of it. Did you have a follow-up question? Yeah, and it probably does, but it really needs to be how much does he change here and how much he is investing. Because the marriage says I'm investing in this. Sometimes that translates to I'm invested in the child, sometimes it doesn't. So, in the back, yes.
Hi, Dr. Rarick. Thank you for speaking to us today. I was wondering if you could address the relationship between persons who identify as LGBT and those persons' relationships with their father. Like, has there been research done on this, and what are any patterns that we see?
That's a good question. In my class, I have them watch this. I don't know if you've seen a TV show. It's called What Would You Do? ABC put it out. I don't know if they still do it. But it shows a father and a son in a diner, actually in Provo, Utah, of all places. And the son they're acting this out, and it looks real, and everybody in the restaurant thinks it's real, and the son says, "Dad, I'm gay." And then the dad is just atrocious in his response. Just says, "That's disgusting. I've got to take a shower." And it's just so mean to the son. And they want to see what the people in the restaurant are going to do about that. And it's just heartbreaking. But I have my students watch it, and I ask them, who are you siding with here? And if they say the son, then or if they say the dad, then I slap them. No, just kidding, I don't slap them. But yes, I don't know any research on this, but I can tell you, especially about the LGBT, but I can tell you about the father-son bond, the realness of that from personal experience. And I'll just tell you, if I can be very personal, if my son were to tell me that and we were in a restaurant and say this, I think the most important thing he needs right there is say, I still love you, I'm not going to shun you, and I need to accept you. We need to do a better job. Dads need to do a better job, especially. Well, I think parents in general. We need to do a better job at saying, I love you unconditionally, and I don't have to quit. I don't have to jump to the preaching immediately. In fact, some dads in that particular scenario jump to the son's side and say, hey, or to the dad and tell the dad, hey, you need to love him, but we need to do a better job. We think that love means I have to embrace everything. Like if I really loved my son, I would let him eat whatever he wants and do whatever he wants. And a wise man once says, true love doesn't support self-defeating behavior. But at the same time, I think fathers and sons, mothers and sons, mothers and daughters, fathers and daughters, we need to express that unconditional love and support. It doesn't mean we have to accept every little thing and try to encourage it. If my son were to come to me and say, Dad, I want to join the circus, no, actually, that's not a good example. I want to go start doing drugs. I don't know. Something that I know that's not going to be helpful for him, or then I would I would express love to him. I would still keep the connection strong, because my connection with him may be the only thing that keeps him going if he gets a lot of opposition from other people. And then when those times are right for me to share and offer guidance and love and nurturance, I would do that. But I think in that situation, the research would be clear on the emotion coaching that I mentioned earlier, and still offering empathy and understanding, and still keeping that connection. So, yes?
Yeah, hi. So I think one concept within our generation is the difference between man and woman. That's been a huge thing that has been a discussion that has been evolving. Mm-hmm. My question to you is, and it's often looked at it in a really burdensome light. So we, as women, we often hear the whole like, women are like, they're so emotional, or like all these like negative perceptions of things that are just kind of inherent
Mm-hmm.
to us.
Mm-hmm.
My question to you in that light would be, one, what has been one thing as a father to a daughter, and also as a husband to a wife, that you've had to realize is a huge difference between being a man and being a woman, that you've had to not only, that might be beyond your understanding, but something that you've willingly adapted to?
Yeah.
And second part of that question is, how has it benefited you? Like, how has the difference in adapting what that woman needs into your practice of being a father or a husband, how has adapting that difference benefited you
Mm-hmm.
rather than burdened you?
Yeah,
that make
thank you.
sense?
Yes. A preliminary thought on that would be that's one of the things that drives divorce, is that we don't complement each other. And too many young people are looking for someone who has the same hobbies, the same likes, and makes me the most comfortable and supports my happiness and makes me happy. It's nobody's job to make you happy. It's your job to make you happy. They can make you happier, but it's not their job to make you happy. And so we find that kind of philosophy drives divorce. And so I think with our natural things that come with the masculine and the feminine, we can look at assets and we can look at liabilities. Something becomes a liability when we focus on the negative part of it. So my wife is a lot better person than I am, I think, overall, if I could say that. I wish you were here because I would love to. We are the weirdest couple. Like I said, I am so stereotypically feminine in some areas, and she is masculine in other areas. But she still has a female brain and a female spirit, and she still has gifts that I don't. She's much more, she's a natural nurturer. And so I see that. And I try to nurture with my children, but that just comes to her. She's a natural homemaker. She just desires to be with the children. And I desire to be with them. Sometimes I'll go, hey, let's go here. She'll go, I don't want to leave the kids. I'm like, I do, let's go. That is a natural thing, I think, was placed in her, and she's fostered that over her years. And my daughters have just taught me to be more tender and to be more slow and to listen better. And that emotions are a good thing, and we can learn how to channel them. You don't try to teach somebody how to master a sport or anything just by getting on them and say, stop acting that way. My daughter Naomi, who's 7, she feels every emotion full throttle. So she'll go from, I mean, she's all over the place within 5 seconds. But I've learned that it's my job to not erase the emotion, but learn how to help to make that an asset. Because she really feels deeply. Our bird just died, by the way, and she was sobbing. And I could feel her pain because she has taught me through her great natural feminine qualities why it means to feel deeply for things like that. I am out of time. I wish I could ask you or give you more questions. Take more questions. Yeah, well, I'll try. My wife says there's no such thing as a short response from me.
As fathers, we have a different responsibility. I mean, than mothers. In the most ideal world, we prefer females to stay at home for kids, right? So we have to go out and work. And also fathers, they value their love to their family and how much resource they can bring back home. So I mean, compared to mothers, the time that fathers spend with their children is very limited. So is there anything we should do, unlimited time, when we are with our children? Like, do we have a checklist that we better...
Yes. I have a lot to say on that. I'll give you just short, quick ones really quickly. Dads, put your technology and your sports away when your children are in the room so you can focus on them. Being in the room does not mean you're present. Okay? Number 2, go on scheduled daddy-daughter dates, or if it's your son, scheduled dates where you can have one-on-one time. Number 3, I do interviews with my children once a month, not to say, hey, what are you smoking? What are you I don't not like that. It's more of tell me what you're feeling. And once a month we have this scheduled time. So you have to be, I like to use the word intentional. Just be intentional about it. And dads have to realize if I'm busy, then I've got to maximize the time I do have with them. And that means I've got to learn to regulate this and not have this regulate me. And I think that's one of the biggest things that get in the way of the parent-child relationship. So don't bring this to the dinner table. Try to have regular dinner time with your family. Those are some quick snippets. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry it was short. So.